There are some serious accusations in this video, but as Christians, we don't get to lower our standard of truth just because we agree with the conclusion. So I'm going to check the claims against Scripture, look at the facts, and distinguish between what the Bible actually says and what we're adding to it.
Yes, I've exposed Mark Driscoll many times on this channel, but you need to see what he says. Watch this.
All right, let's get right in. Now, let me give some credit here. I am indebted a lot of study this week. I am indebted to the following pastors and theologians: Rob Ketterling, Ryan Visconti, Gary Hamrick, Mark Driscoll, Josh McPherson, Wayne Grudem, for their thoughts.
If you look at Romans 16, verses 17 and 18, it says that we are to mark false teachers and turn away from them, not praise them or cite them or let our congregation think that they're amazing. And by Josh doing this, he is making these wolves in sheep's clothing look legit. He's going there right there and giving all his tens of thousands of followers and congregants the green light to follow these dangerous people. I mean, he's leading people into the jaws of hungry, ravenous wolves. And please understand, Jesus warned us about ravenous wolves in Matthew 7, verse 15. And please know that behind ravenous wolves, if you look at the Greek, it's always about money. It's a robber, an extortioner, a swindler. And this is one of the reasons why Josh Howerton is so...
I need to correct something here. Romans chapter 15 absolutely does tell believers to watch out for people who cause divisions and create obstacles contrary to apostolic teaching. But the claim that the Greek behind ravenous wolves is always about money goes too far. The Greek word harpak carries the idea of being ravenous, rapacious, or predatory. It can also be used for robber, swindler, or extortioner. So greed can certainly characterize a false teacher. But Matthew chapter 7 verse 15 is describing false prophets as predatory wolves. The Greek word itself does not mean every false teacher must be identified specifically by money. That's an important distinction.
Now, sadly, many people think there's nothing wrong with what I just showed them, but you would absolutely be deceived. 1 Timothy chapter 2 and 1 Corinthians 14 forbid women to preach in church, yet Josh allows it, and he is disobeying again God's word. Also, 1 Timothy chapter 3 and Titus chapter 1 make it clear that a pastor is a he, not a she. Yet they are calling this lady an executive pastor at Lakepointe Church.
This one needs more context. There is a strong complementarian interpretation of 1 Timothy chapter 2 that reserve authoritative pastoral teaching and the office of elder for qualified men. But we shouldn't pretend that's the only biblical text involved. 1 Corinthians chapter 11 verse 5 explicitly discusses women praying and prophesying. That doesn't automatically prove that prophecy is identical to preaching a sermon, but it does make a blanket statement like women cannot speak or teach in church. Much harder to defend. And here's another important fact. Lakepointe's published position actually says that eldership is restricted to men, while both men and women may teach under the authority of those elders. You can disagree with their interpretation, but accurately representing someone's position matters before accusing them of disobeying Scripture.
Again, this is disgusting and it's a disgrace. And at number 4, Josh is all about the money. He also lies about tithing to manipulate people to give.
This is why, interestingly, God's saying the first 10%, that first part, that I read it to you earlier. He's saying that belongs to me. And so he said, that's why he says brought. So when we keep that part, what we're actually doing is we're stealing from God. Interestingly, that's exactly what God says later in Joshua 7. Watch what he says. God pronounces the sin of Israel, and he says they've taken some of the devoted things. They have what? They have stolen. They've stolen from me. So you may never have known you were doing this, but actually the first part belongs to God. Why? Because he's first. And when we keep God's part, what we're doing is we're stealing from the living God.
And you need to know the truth, that there is not one single verse anywhere in the New Testament to the church commanding us to give a certain amount, or saying that, if you don't give 10% or you don't tithe, you are stealing or robbing from God. I have broken down the tithe in several episodes on my channel, proving that it was for Israel only and that it was a tax between 23 and 24%, and it was paid in food, not money. So I'm going to challenge all the people that go to Lakepointe Church. How about next Sunday, you bring Pastor Josh a bunch of carrots and corn and potatoes and see how he freaks out over that. See, the whole tithing thing is how Josh Howerton has a mega church. He guilts people to give and manipulates them, and even gives special treatment to wealthy donors. I mean, any pastor who runs their church like this is a wolf in sheep's clothing and is a total prosperity pimp. And number 3.
Here, I think Jordan raises a legitimate biblical concern. When the New Testament instructs Christians about giving, 2 Corinthians chapter 9 says each believer should give where he has decided in his heart, not reluctantly or under compulsion. 1 Corinthians chapter 16 describes giving in proportion to one's income. What I do not find is that a New Testament command saying every Christian must give exactly 10% to the local church, or else that Christian is stealing from God. Christians should give. Christians should give generously. But if we're going to tell a believer, unless you give 10%, you are robbing God, then we need to demonstrate that obligation from the New Covenant scriptures instead of simply assuming that Israel's tithe transfer unchanged to the church. That's where context matters.
Is that Josh Howerton recommends to his congregation that people listen to Pastor Robert Morris. And no, I'm not kidding.
Very frankly, if you want a starting point, I strongly recommend, there's a guy named Robert Morris, Pastor Robert Morris.
What's wrong with you people?
In the Dallas area. Go listen to his series just called The Blessed Life. There's going to be some things that you may disagree with. That's fine. You're a big boy. Eat the meat and spit the bones. Eat the meat and spit the bones. But that's a great example of consuming teaching that is biblical and winsome on the topic of giving. So there it was. 3 levels, 5 rhythms. Vision requires provision. Go get them.
Now, what you just saw is unbiblical and totally disgusting. And no, not one verse in the Bible says that we're to eat the meat and spit out the bones. It says that we are to avoid false teachers and not pay any attention to them, not listen to them or agree with some of the stuff that they say. Not at all. The fact that Josh would point his congregation to a convicted felon and have them listen to his stuff is absolutely delusional. The sad part is that so many people love and adore Josh and want their ears tickled that they will do just as he said, and they will go watch Robert Morris and continue to be deceived. And coming in at number 2,
there is an important factual distinction here. Robert Morris is now a convicted offender. On October 2nd, 2025, Oklahoma's Attorney General announced that Morris pleaded guilty to 5 counts of lewd or indecent acts with a child. That's established fact. But chronology matters. Before I criticize Josh Howerton for recommending a convicted felon, I need to know when this recommendation was recorded. If Howerton made this recommendation before the allegation became publicly established and before Morris pleaded guilty, then describing the original recommendation that way is anachronistic. If Howerton continued promoting Morris after those facts became known, that is a different matter. Christians don't get to collapse the timeline because it makes an argument stronger. And there's another weak argument here. Saying eat the meat and spit out the bones isn't in the Bible doesn't prove the principle itself is unbiblical. Acts chapter 17 praises the Berean for examining teaching against Scripture. And 1 Thessalonians chapter 5 tells believers to test everything and hold on to what is good. The real question isn't whether the exact phrase appears in Scripture. The question is whether the teacher you're recommending has errors or conduct serious enough that Scripture requires separation. That's the argument we actually need to make.
And this leads us to point number 1, which is that Josh Howerton has zero accountability. He won't even tell us who his elders are. I mean, if you were to go to his website right now today, you would not be able to find any name of any elder. In fact, I've tried to do this myself, and it is password protected. Again, this is wrong, and this is absolutely unbiblical. And I want you to know, Mary Cootie, who's the former worship pastor of 5 years at Lakepointe Church, her and her husband were on staff for those 5 years. And during those 5 years, they didn't even know who the elders were at this church. That is extremely alarming and concerning and wrong. See, Josh Howerton may be well-spoken and may even teach some good things. But when you look past all of that, you see someone who lies, someone who manipulates people, someone who praises heretics, and who is disobeying God's word. And according to the Bible, Josh Howerton must be marked and avoided because he is not a man of God and he is not a biblical pastor.
Thank you for watching today's episode. Click the left.
This is another place where I will separate a legitimate question from an unproven conclusion. If church members cannot determine who their elders are or who holds their senior pastor accountable, that deserves an explanation. Church leadership should not be functionally untouchable, but a password-protected web page does not by itself prove that there is zero accountability. Lakepointe publicly refers to an elder structure, and its published ministry policies state that they were approved by the elders. So my questions will be more specific. Who are the elders? What authority do they have over the senior pastor? Can they discipline or remove him? And what process exists when accusations are made? Because 1 Timothy chapter 5 gives us both sides of biblical accountability. An accusation against an elder requires proper evidence. But an elder who persists in sin is not protected by his position. Paul says he is to be rebuked publicly. That's a much stronger biblical standard than either blind loyalty to a pastor or automatically believing every accusation made against one. And that's really my issue with this entire conversation. Biblical discernment isn't picking Team Josh or Team Jordan. If a pastor teaches falsely, manipulates people, or become morally disqualified, Scripture gives the church standard for dealing with that. But the critics have standards too. Don't exaggerate the Greek. Don't remove verses from their context. Don't present a disputed interpretation as though no faithful Christian has ever read the passage differently. And don't rearrange the timeline to make an accusation sound worse. Acts chapter 17 gives us that model. Test what you're hearing against Scripture. Truth don't need an exaggeration to survive. Thank you for watching, and stay tuned for more.